I wanted to ask just some questions that maybe some people might be interested in. Maybe I was going to ask you maybe about the CUM issue. What is your view regarding attending, let's say someone to attend mass, let's say at the SSPX chapel, if there's, if they're the only place available? What would your view be on that?
What we think here in Argentina is that we have to consider the situation, the general situation, and we have to work with much people that is not aware of the depth of the problem, right? So if they go to the society with good conscience, and they don't ask anything, and it is people, for example, that we don't see many times a year or much during the life, let's say.
Sure.
We do not say anything, understand? We do not say anything, understand? We do not say anything, understand? But if some people is coming to ask us about, should I go to the society? Of course, we say no. There is no obligation. Not only obligation, but I would not advise to go. But it is like this that we work here. I understand that many people is very. They need the mass, they need the sacraments, and they act in good faith, and they don't ask anything, and we don't have them as a regular faithful, so they come to visit the place, or they come to mass once in a while, maybe once a year or something like that. We don't say anything about it. But if someone is asking us, what should I do? Should I go? Shouldn't I go? Of course, we advise them not to, right? Because of we just explain the issue and let them to make their own decision.
What would you say would be the main reason you would advise somebody, that they would ask you, can I go to the society chapel, and you say no? What would be the, if they ask why, well, how come, or why, what would be your answer?
It's because of the question of the UNACUM. When you pray in the canon UNACUM Francisco Bergoglio, the case, or John Paul II, or Benedict the 16, excuse me, or any kind of so-called Pope in the Vatican II, you are united with him in common union. That is communion, common union with him. So you are participating in his errors. Understand? So the mass could be valid, the mass of the society, if they are really priests. They are valid priests, and they celebrate validly mass. But my point is, even saving the good conscience of the priests, are these masses agreeable to God or not? That is my question. Objectively speaking, right? Objectively speaking is, so then it begins a question of good faith or bad faith, or question of ignorance, invincible or invincible. So that's why that is our act. That if someone is asking you objectively, Father, should I go to the society mass? No. Must I go to the masses of the society Pius X? No. But if you are going, and I am not an authority to you, and you come just to my place once in a while, because you are here in in the area for vacation or holidays, I don't say anything, because it's something that could be a good, a big. I don't know in English, but it would be a huge charge in his shoulders, you know.
Yeah.
That something that you need time to explain the whole issue. So it's not just a conversation outside the church, right? Outside the after mass. My point is, you go to mass to please God, not to please yourself. Many people says, I need the mass. I need the mass. Why you need the mass? Because it pleases God or it pleases you? Understand? Many times people don't make the difference because they, for example, they say, I pray the rosary because I feel good when I pray the rosary. Fine, but you don't have to pray the rosary because you feel good. It does because Our Lady asked you to do it, and it pleases Our Lady. So, because otherwise, if it doesn't please you, you are not going to pray it. Understand?
Mm-hmm.
So the Mass is something that is as a precept of the Holy Mother Church to go to Mass because it pleases God. But if I have not a Mass available, I can sanctify my Sunday by praying at home or making some sacrifice or a longer prayer, right? But the question is to please God, not to please yourself. If you're going to Mass because you get a consolation and is your first motive of going to Mass to please yourself, it's not a good motive. You need to go to Mass to please God. Is that Mass pleasing God? Yes or not? That is the question. If I celebrate a Mass in common union with Bergoglio, is that Mass pleasing God or not? And my will should be to please God, not to, to listen to the Latin Mass and the Latin language and to smell the incense and to see good vestments and a nice altar.
Nice.
One announcement, then I'd just like to mention something else. For those that are being confirmed, the confirmation robes are in the library. If you could try it on, and then if it doesn't fit, then let me know, either now or at 1 o'clock when we have the practice. Something came to my attention. A number of people contacted me this week, and then there was an article condemning the Congregation of Mary Immaculate Queen. So I just wanted to explain it. And it was more than one person, so I said, okay, let me explain it. First of all, it's very important that we stay, especially in these times, that we follow church law and that we stay balanced. We don't go to one extreme where we're too strict or we're too lax, that we just follow what the church teaches. And I don't know if you've ever read this book. It's by Patrick Henry Omler. He's passed away, but he wrote this in the late 1960s, and it was a classic because it led millions of people away from the new church to realize that the English Mass was, the new Mass was invalid. But I remember offering Mass in Australia. I went there twice, and then met with him, and he was talking about theologians on the internet, and he said somebody that he knew, he asked him a week before, what is the sacrament? So for those who are being confirmed, you have to know this, okay. What is a sacrament? A sacrament is an outward sign instituted by Christ to give grace. And then there's 7 sacraments: confirmations, 1 baptism, Holy Eucharist, penance, etc. So anyway, so we asked this person, what is a sacrament? And he didn't know. And then the next week, he's a theologian on the internet, a great theologian. He didn't even know what a sacrament was. So there's an issue about the words in the Mass. Now, there have been 3 periods of time when there were several years without a pope. So after the death of Pope Marcellinus, there was a vacancy of 3 years, 7 months. And that was in 304 to 308. After the death of Pope Clement IV, there was a vacancy of 2 years and 9 months. And that was in 1268 to 1271. After the death of Pope Nicholas IV, there was a vacancy of almost 2 years and 4 months, from 1292 to 1294. And in the altar missal, when we begin the canon of the Mass, the very first prayer, the priest prays, Unicum famulo tua Papa Nostra. And what that means is, Unicum is together with or one with thy servant, our Pope. And then you list the name of the Pope. And then in the front of the altar missal, in the Roman numerals, small Roman numeral 38, it says what to do. It says, where it says, Unicum famulo tua Papa Nostra, and then the letter N, you list the name of the Pope. You speak the name of the Pope. But when the chair is vacant, then these words are omitted. So, and then it's interesting, you list the name without the number of the reigning Pope, and then you bow your head slightly toward the missal by pronouncing the name. It says, if the Holy See be vacant, he omits the word Unicum, etc. So, as traditional Catholics, I believe that the chair of Peter is vacant, but there's a number of traditional Catholics that aren't sure, they just don't know what. But they know Vatican II is heretical, the new Mass is wrong, and they just want to be Catholics. So I've never required anybody coming to church here to reject Francis or these false popes. And then I've never refused the sacraments or said it's a mortal sin if you don't believe what I believe. It's confusing. So, but it has become an issue. And then I said I got this. These number of people contacted me, and there have been a number of priests that say it's a mortal sin if you attend a Mass and the priest says the words Unicum Papa Nostra, and then they put Francis's name. And St. Augustine wisely said, what those sins are that exclude from the kingdom of God, in other words, mortal sins, is most difficult to determine and most dangerous to assign. Yet he spoke of certain crimes such as adultery as obviously mortal. St. Raymond of Pennafort speaks in the same sense. Be not too prone to judge sins to be mortal when you have not the fullest evidence. and St. Thomas Aquinas, it's dangerous to decide what sins are mortal unless we have positive teaching to guide us. So what has happened is there's some people who are rigorous in it, and this person who was condemning the Congregation of Mary Immaculate Queen said if somebody, that we're too lax on this issue, and that if you don't say it's a mortal sin, if a priest says this and deny people the sacraments, if they go to a Unum Mass, then there's something wrong. So, but I think that's extreme. So I believe heresy separates us from the Catholic Church, but there's some places at times where people don't have an opportunity to go to a sedevacantist priest, so they need the Mass and the sacraments. Now, just real quickly explain what the laws of the Church are. For one example, as I said, I flew to Perth, Western Australia, and they pronounce it Path. There's no R's, like shock, not shark, it's a shock, so it's Path. But anyway, I went to Perth several times, and I'm thinking, wow, this is a long way. The flight from Los Angeles to Auckland, to Sydney is the longest flight in the world, and then it's another 5 hours or so to get to the other side of Australia, Perth. So I'm thinking, is there no other priest available? But what happened is maybe every 3 months a priest in the United States would offer Mass for these good Catholics, but there was another Latin Mass. It was a valid priest, and he offered the Mass in a cum. So Father Stepanek wrote I knew him in Ohio. He was a Franciscan priest, a doctor of sacred theology, and a very holy priest who didn't go along with Vatican II. And then he says, he read this article where they said it's, if you say a Mass una cum, you attend it, even if there's no other Mass to attend, it's wrong. He says, if we try to use the words of the Pope, again, we're not talking about Francis or something like that, true popes. If we're trying to use the words of the popes and pre-Vatican II theologians, as already quoted above, and make them say that attendance at una cum benedicto Masses, at that time was Benedict, is absolutely forbidden under any and all circumstances, it is we who are really doing the kind of forbidding, not the popes and the pre-Vatican II theologians. Because he goes on, just try to find anything in the popes and pre-Vatican theologians that totally and absolutely forbids any and all attendance at una cum benedicto Masses by traditional sedevacantist Catholics. It just isn't there. And then, I don't know of any older traditional clergy that we've ever worked with. Bishop Gerard de Laurier in France, Bishop McKenna, who ordained me, Bishop Carmona from Mexico, Father Stepanek, Father Oswald Baker, etc., who taught that it's a mortal sin for sedevacantists to attend the una cum Masses. And the bishop wrote a little thing to explain this. He said, although the Congregation of Mary Immaculate Queen does not accept Francis as a legitimate successor of St. Peter, it does not consider such traditional priests who offer the una cum Masses as schismatic. For example, the Society of Pius X, if they're a validly ordained priest. And then, for if such priests were schismatic in the canonical sense of the word, then they would be required upon their recognition of the vacancy of the apostolic see to abjure their error and be received back in the church. Nevertheless, it has never been the practice of any traditional bishop or priest to require this abjuration of error of any priest who at one time mistakenly recognized Francis as a true pope. So again, I remember speaking to a very good priest, an older priest, and he was saying that at that time John Paul II was the worst pope. He was a rat. He was the second worst pope in history, and then Paul VI was the worst. And he was saying that Luther, John Paul II was saying that Luther was a great theologian, but he just could not make the break and say that he's not the Pope. And it's confusing. And I remember another priest I spoke to, he said he was going to pray for the Pope that he's converted and becomes a Catholic again. Very confusing. This does not mean that the Congregation of Mary Magdalene Queen in any way endorses a theological contradiction of those priests who maintain that Francis is the true Pope. Lastly, we exhort the faithful to use great discretion when they approach such priests for the sacraments. This is especially true in regard to their children, who may be confused by their erroneous opinions on the papacy and on the infallibility of the Church. So in other words, if they walk in the church and they got a picture of Francis, then it's confusing. And then they say he's a heretic. And so the mind of the Church is that the sacraments were instituted by Christ for our salvation. And then Canon 2261 reflects the minds of the Church. There's over 2,000 laws of the Church, and Canon 2261 says this: an excommunicated person is forbidden licitly to consecrate or administer sacraments and sacramentals except as follows. And then it says, except as provided in number 3, and we'll talk about number 3. The faithful can, for any just cause, ask for the sacraments or sacramentals of one who is excommunicated, especially if there's no one else to give them. And in such cases, the excommunicated person so asked may administer them and is not obliged to ask the reason for the request. So, if the Church says, and the Church allows, if the faithful need to receive the sacraments, let's say go to confession and there's no one else available except an excommunicated person, that in such cases they may administer the sacraments, the person may receive them, and the excommunicated person is not obliged to ask the reason for the request. But from an excommunicated vitandus, in other words, someone who's declared excommunicated, or one for whom there's a declaratory condemnatory sentence, the faithful may only do so in danger of death, ask for sacramental absolution. So what, as I was saying, it's the mind of the Church. The sacraments were instituted by Christ for our salvation. And if the Church, if someone has nowhere else to go, there's no other valid priest, there's no other valid sacraments, then they could go to a priest even though he's confused about the situation. And if things were so clear-cut, why didn't they bring this up in the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, that it would be wrong for anybody to attend a unicum Mass? I mean, I've never said unicum Mass, never, until we get a real Pope, okay, then it'll be a unicum. But I haven't said it in union with any of these. And it's not just mentioning the name of the Pope, because it shows a unity of belief. I'm offering this Mass because I believe the same way the Pope believes. It's a unity of belief, worship. I worship together with him, and then I also accept his authority. But still, according to Canon 2261, a person still would be able to receive the sacraments. And what I said earlier about a mortal sin, what St. Thomas Aquinas, St. Augustine, St. Raymond were saying, there has to be some real clear proof that something's a mortal sin before you forbid the sacraments and demand it of the faithful. And if something took 20 or 30 years to determine it was a mortal sin, then that just isn't the way it is. Of course, we're talking about a validly ordained priest. He's using a Catholic rite. He may be mistaken on the papacy, and but we're in a unique situation. It's very confusing. There's nothing officially declared. So I believe it's not a mortal sin. If there's no one else available, they shouldn't be denied the sacraments. And the supreme law is the salvation of souls. So basically what the bishop was saying is he doesn't recommend people to go to an unicum mass. He doesn't forbid it, because church law doesn't forbid it. But you have to take necessary safeguards. And then based on the teaching of St. Augustine, St. Raymond, and St. Thomas, unless there's clear proof that something is a serious matter, a mortal sin, we should not demand it of the faithful. Furthermore, if this matter were so clear and obvious, why did the older clergy never hold this position?
Es buena idea, usted mencionó, no íbamos a ir porque no había otra. ¿Es buena idea ir a donde no es completamente católica?
Quando não há outra parte sem involucrar-se.
Os advocantistas são unidos? Ou há divergências entre eles? Como ficam os fiéis que participam da missa tradicional, mas o padre que celebra aceita Francisco como pontífice?
A missão na CUM, né?
Missão na CUM. Esse que responderam aqui embaixo. Aqui.
Mas uma pessoa de convicção realmente católica, que não aceite o Vaticano II, que não aceite os papas, falsos papas, de Roncalli a Bergoglio, de João XXIII a Francisco, ela não pode assistir uma missão, ela participa daquele sacrifício, e é o sacrifício maculado, não imaculado, maculado, que tem mácula. Ela está em união. Veja, a missa unacum é uma coisa boa, porque a igreja manda isso, tá? Nós devemos rezar com o Papa, porque rezando com o Papa, nós rezamos pelas intenções do Papa, quem reza com o Papa, etc. Agora, se no lugar do Papa eu tenho um ímpio que reza com Buda, que reza com Maomé, que reza com Shiva, que reza com um monte de porcaria, rezando com ele, eu estou em comunhão com aqueles que estão em comunhão com ele, de maneira indireta. Passando por Bergoglio, eu chego a Maomé, a Shiva, a Buda, Lutero, a todas essas coisas assim. Então, quem está ali na igreja presente, escuta o Orata Fratres, está ali participando, reza, está participando do sacrifício junto com Francisco. E é uma coisa horrível. Vai ocorrer um sacrilégio dos piores que há, etc. Mas vai. Vai ocorrer um sacrilégio dos piores que há, etc. Mas vai. Ah, não, eu vou na missa negra, vai. A comunhão é de verdade mesmo.
In this video we have just watched, Father Gabriel Maria, linked to Bishop Espina of Argentina, has just informed us that it is sacrilege to go to the Unicum Mass. I could add even more, like the articles by Father Sakata, who says that it is not just sacrilege, but also an act of schism, since whoever attends these masses is in union with an antipope, therefore he is all a schismatic. That said, then we see that Father Gabriel Maria is going against the Superior General of the CMRI, Bishop Pivarunas, who publicly teaches that, to paraphrase him, we should not demand not to participate in the Unicum Mass of our faithful. So here we see something very serious. Father Gabriel is going against CMRI teaching. If for Father Gabriel Maria it is sacrilege to participate in the Unicum Mass, moral theology teaches that Father Gabriel Maria has the duty and obligation to publicly admonish Bishop Pivarunas against his teaching, or Superior General teaching an error that makes people in the as faithful committing sacrilege and schism relevant. We Brazilians and Portuguese faithful of Bishop Dolan, we agree with what Father Gabriel says, and we support his initiative to go against the doctrine of Pivarunas. We follow what Bishop Dolan and Father Sakata say. And it seems that finally a priest linked to CMRI, if you understand the gravity of this teaching, we must not participate in a sacrilegious act, much less in an act of schism. That's it. Thanks to all English listeners. Pax Christi.
Based on the teaching of St. Augustine, St. Raymond, and St. Thomas, unless there's clear proof that something is a serious matter, a mortal sin, we should not demand it of the faithful. Furthermore, if this matter were so clear and obvious, why did the older clergy never hold this position?